The blizzard had teeth. That's what Mara understood in the moment her body hit the frozen ground, still bleeding from the silver chains they'd used to drag her beyond the pack borders. Her silver hair, the mark of her cursed bloodline, caught the moonlight like a beacon of shame. The northern wind carried the scent of her own blood back toward the fortress she'd never see again. A farewell written in copper and grief. 7 winters banished. 7 winters since they'd called her Pathfinder, a word that had meant hope before it meant heresy. The rogues found her first. She heard their snarls before she saw their eyes, yellow, feral, hungry. They'd been tracking the borderlands for weeks, exiled from packs across the frozen territories. Mara's hand instinctively moved to the obsidian dagger at her hip, the only weapon they'd left her. A mercy, they'd called it. An insult she knew it to be. Omega alone, one of them growled, his form shifting, massive shoulders, claws already extended. The goddess smiles tonight. Mara stood. Her legs trembled, but her spine straightened. In the moment between heartbeats, she understood. This was not her ending. This was her beginning. She'd learned something in 7 winters of exile. Survival teaches you that fear is just another language of power. She began to sing. It wasn't a sound meant for ears. It was older than words, deeper than breath. A resonance that moved through the blood, that spoke to the wolf heart in every shifter, that called to the ancient magic her bloodline carried. The rogues froze, confused, mesmerized. The song wrapped around them like silver chains, gentle but absolute. That's when he arrived. The king came through the blizzard like the storm itself had chosen a form. His white fur was flecked with blood, not his own, she could tell by how he moved, predatory and controlled. His eyes were silver blue, the color of ice at the moment it begins to crack. When he shifted to human form, Mara saw the scars first. One bisected his left eye, another ran along his ribs. A king who still bled, a king who still bore his wounds. King Aldrich of the Northern Throne. The rogues scattered like shadows before his growl. He didn't chase them. He simply stood at the edge of the firelight she'd managed to kindle, watching her with an intensity that made her throat tighten. "You're banished," he said. Not a question. The scent of her exile was written into her very bones. "And you're hunting alone," Mara replied, her voice steady despite the hammering in her chest. "That's not what a king does." His scarred face shifted, not quite a smile, but close. Something dangerous and broken and almost alive. "Neither is mercy," he said. "Yet here I am." The snow fell between them, each flake a question neither was ready to answer. Behind him, she could see the trace marks of a larger pack, wolves who'd followed him into the winter night. But he'd come forward alone. He'd come into her song, and he hadn't stopped. "Why?" she whispered. Aldrich stepped closer. The scar tissue around his eye caught the moonlight, silver and tragic. "Because," he said, "I've been alone long enough to recognize it in another soul, and because a king who forgets mercy is simply a tyrant wearing a crown." He extended his hand, scarred, calloused, real. Mara looked at it for a long moment. In taking it, she would bind herself to him. In refusing, she would bind herself to the winter. She took his hand. His grip was warm, alive, and when he pulled her close, she felt the steady hammer of his heartbeat against her back. A heart that still beat. A king who still chose. "We're leaving," he said to the darkness. "The territories aren't safe for her alone." "And are they safe for her with you?" asked a voice from the shadows. Another wolf emerged, scarred, loyal, ancient, Aldrich's second. "No," the king said quietly, "but nothing is safe anymore. We stopped pretending that winters ago." He wrapped his cloak around Mara's shoulders, and it smelled of pine and smoke and something else, something like a promise written in blood. "What's your name?" she asked. "Aldrich." He didn't ask for hers. "But my pack calls me the Cursed King. Fair warning." "I'm Mara," she said, "but my old pack called me the Pathfinder." She paused. "Before they called me a heretic." For the first time, something like recognition flickered in his scarred face. He'd been called heretic, too. She could see it in the way he carried his wounds, not as shame, but as testimony. "Then we're both monsters," he said. And he meant it not as an insult, but as a door opening. The blizzard wrapped around them both as they turned toward the north, toward mountains that had never forgiven them, toward a fate neither had chosen, but both would now face together. Behind them, the rogues watched from the shadows, afraid to follow a king who'd chosen an exiled Omega over safety. Behind them, the world they'd known continued to burn. Ahead of them, something like redemption began to take shape, uncertain, dangerous, and absolutely necessary. The castle rose from the mountain like a monument to regret. Aldrich's fortress wasn't built from stone alone. It was built from choices. From winters of isolation, from wars won and territories lost, from the weight of a crown that had never fit quite right. The walls were obsidian black, and they caught the moonlight in fractures, as if the very stone had been shattered and reassembled 1,000 times. Mara felt it the moment they crossed the threshold, the magic. It wrapped around her like fingers, curious and cold and infinitely sad. This place held pain the way mountains hold snow. Every room remembered suffering. "The fortress of broken glass," Aldrich said, and there was irony in his voice, dark humor that she was beginning to recognize as the only armor he had left. "My architects had a sense of poetry about my failures." The throne room opened before them, vast, echoing, empty, except for the ice-blue light filtering through windows that showed only sky and stars. No paintings of ancestors, no monuments to victory, just emptiness and the soft sound of wind. "Your pack?" Mara asked. "Waits in the lower halls," he said. "They know not to question me when I bring strangers into the inner sanctum. But they will ask questions. That's what a pack does. They protect their king by doubting everyone else." He led her deeper, past corridors lined with mirrors that didn't reflect, or rather, they reflected something else, something twisted and older. Mara saw her own face in them and barely recognized the woman staring back. When had she become so hollow? When had her silver hair begun to look less like a mark of destiny and more like a curse written on her very cells? "7 winters," Aldrich said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "That's how long you've been alone." It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "The way you move," he interrupted, "like someone who's learned that the world doesn't want you. I know that movement, Mara. I've practiced it for 15 years. 15 years. She tried to imagine it. 15 winters of walking these halls alone, carrying a crown no one had asked him to bear, making decisions that split packs and created enemies. 15 years of being called cursed. They reached a chamber deep within the fortress. A sanctuary, she realized. The walls here were softer, hung with furs and lit by a fire that burned with colors she'd never seen before, deep purples and silver blues, as if the flames themselves were singing. "My private quarters," Aldrich said, and there was something almost vulnerable in the way he said it. "No one comes here. No one asks me questions here. It's where I—" He paused, choosing words. "It's where I remember that I was human before I became a king." Mara moved toward the fire, and the warmth of it seeped into her bones. She hadn't felt warmth in so long, genuine, unconditional warmth that didn't demand anything in return. "Why bring me here?" she asked. Aldrich moved to a cabinet and withdrew a shirt, simple, soft linen, and laid it on the furs. "Because you need to rest. Because tomorrow my pack will ask questions, and I need to decide how to answer them. And because—" He turned to face her fully, and in the strange firelight, his scarred face looked almost like a work of art. Broken, yes, but intentional. Beautiful in the way that destruction could be beautiful. "Because I heard your song, Mara, and I need to know what a pathfinder is really capable of." She understood then. He wasn't offering her safety. He was offering her a purpose, a reason to stop running. "The song," she said slowly. "Your pack fears it." "My pack fears what they don't understand," Aldrich replied. "And they fear change. But I—" He moved closer, and she could feel the heat radiating from him. Not just physical heat, but something else. Something like loneliness recognizing itself in another person. "I stopped fearing change when I decided to stop being what they wanted me to be." He raised a hand, and for a moment, she thought he might touch her face. Instead, he traced the air just above her skin, as if honoring a boundary neither of them was ready to cross. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow we'll tell them you're under my protection, that the rogue wolves drove you to the border and I claimed you by right of kingship. It's not a lie, not entirely, but it's a story they can accept." "And what's the truth?" Mara asked. Aldrich turned back to the fire, and his shadow on the wall looked like a wolf's head, proud, scarred, watching. "The truth," he said quietly, "is that I've been waiting for someone like you for so long that I almost forgot what I was waiting for. A pathfinder, someone who sees the way forward when the world has gone blind." He left her alone in that chamber, and Mara sat by the silver-blue fire, listening to it sing. It was a different song than her own, older, rougher, more masculine, but there was harmony in it, resonance, the kind of recognition that couldn't be explained, only felt. Outside, the blizzard continued to fall. Inside, in the fortress of broken glass, something was beginning to mend. The pack assembly happened at dawn. Mara stood in the great hall, surrounded by 50 wolves in human form, some young, some ancient, all of them watching her with eyes that ranged from curious to hostile. Aldrich sat on his throne of black iron, and even in stillness he radiated authority. But it was the kind of authority that came from surviving, not from oppressing. The kind that was respected only because it had been earned through suffering. "This is Mara," Aldrich announced, his voice carrying through the hall like winter wind. "She's under my personal protection. Any wolf who challenges this will answer to me." The silence that followed was dangerous. One of the elder wolves, scarred like Aldrich, but with the weight of age rather than tragedy, stepped forward. "My king," the elder said, and there was respect in his voice, but also concern. "The girl carries the scent of exile. What pack banished her?" "Does it matter?" Aldrich asked coldly. "I'm reclaiming her." "It matters," another voice said, this one female, sharp as broken ice. A wolf emerged from the crowd. Her fur, even in human form, somehow suggesting the texture of her wolf self, was slate gray. "Because if she's cursed, if she's carrying some kind of—" "She carries nothing but her own survival," Aldrich interrupted, "which is more than I can say for most of you." The tension in the room spiked. Mara felt it like a physical thing, a pressure against her skin. This was how packs worked, through assertion and dominance, through testing boundaries. Aldrich was protecting her by making her his claim. But protection like that came with a cost. It made her his responsibility. It made her matter. "Prove it," the gray-furred woman said. "If she's worthy of the king's protection, prove she's not a liability." Aldrich rose from his throne. The movement was slow, deliberate, and when he descended the steps, every wolf in the room went still. "No," he said. "I don't need to prove anything to you, Kessa. I never have. You follow me because we've survived together, but you will not question my choices." "Even when they endanger the pack?" Kessa replied. "Especially then," Aldrich said. He reached the bottom of the stairs and looked back at Mara. "Come here." Mara stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee this place of power and hierarchy and judgment. But she'd run for 7 winters. She'd learned that running never led anywhere except further into the cold. When she reached him, Aldrich took her hand. The gesture was simple, but it was also absolute. He was claiming her publicly. He was making a statement that transcended pack law. "She's mine to protect," he said, "and I'm asking you all. I'm asking you to trust me one more time." "The last time we trusted you," Kessa said quietly, "you brought the southern packs down on our borders. You made choices that cost us 17 wolves." The air in the room seemed to thin. Mara felt Aldrich's hand tighten around hers, not painfully, but with the force of suppressed emotion. This was his wound, then. This was the thing that haunted him. "Yes," Aldrich said, "I did, and I'll carry that death with me until I die. But running from my mistakes won't bring them back. Neither will refusing to take risks." He paused. "She sang to 7 rogues alone and held them without violence. She stood in the snow and didn't break. That's the kind of strength we need." He raised Mara's hand to his lips and kissed her palm, a gesture that meant something in wolf law. A blood oath. A declaration that their fates were intertwined. "I've made my choice," he said. "The question is, will you honor it?" The pack moved, one by one, wolves who'd followed Aldrich through wars and winters and the slow erosion of certainty. They bowed their heads in acceptance. Not agreement. Acceptance. There was a difference. Only Kessa remained unmoved. "This ends badly," the gray wolf said, not to Aldrich, but to Mara directly. "I can smell it on you, the kind of change that destabilizes packs, the kind that makes alphas forget their duty." Mara met her gaze steadily. "Maybe," Mara said, "but at least he'll have chosen it. At least he'll have stopped running from his own heart." Something flickered in Kessa's expression. Not anger, but recognition. The gray wolf nodded slowly, respectfully, and turned away. That night, in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, Aldrich explained the blood oath to her. "It means," he said, sitting close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, "that we're bound. Not by law, not by pack hierarchy, but by choice. If you need me, I come. If I need you." He trailed off. "Well, I think I've already proven that." "Why would a king bind himself to an exiled Omega?" Mara asked. Aldrich was quiet for a long time. His scarred face caught the firelight, and in the shadows he looked almost like a different person, younger perhaps, or simply more honest. "Because," he said finally, "I've spent 15 years trying to be the king my pack needed, and it's hollowed me out. It's made me someone I don't recognize." He turned to her. "But when I heard your song, when I saw you stand alone against those 7 wolves, I remembered something I'd forgotten, that a king is just a man first, and a man can choose love, a man can choose mercy, a man can choose to be more than his crown demands." He reached out and touched her face, his scarred fingers gentle against her skin. "You don't have to feel the same way," he said. "The oath doesn't demand it. But I needed you to know, I'm not protecting you because you're useful to the pack. I'm protecting you because you're worth protecting. Because you matter to me as a person, not as a pathfinder or a strategy or a solution to a pack problem." Mara felt tears on her cheeks and didn't remember crying. 7 winters, she whispered. 7 winters of being told I was wrong. That my gifts were dangerous, that my blood was cursed. Aldrich wiped the tears away. "Your blood isn't cursed," he said. "It's ancient, and there's a difference." Outside, in the great hall, the pack settled into sleep. But in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, 2 broken people sat together in the darkness, learning that sometimes redemption doesn't come from healing alone. Sometimes it comes from being witnessed. And now I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments of the night they find you. 3 weeks passed. The fortress became less like a prison and more like a sanctuary, or perhaps Mara simply learned to distinguish between the two. Aldrich showed her the library carved into the mountain's heart, where ancient texts spoke of pathfinders, not as curses, but as gifts, guardians of direction, seers of true paths through confusion. Her bloodline wasn't marked by shame in these texts. It was marked by reverence. The pack began to change around her too. Wolves who'd been hardened by years of conflict started to soften. She taught them to sing the way she sang, not the binding song that held rogues frozen, but songs of healing, songs that mended fractures in bone, that stilled infection, that quieted nightmares. Kessa watched from the edges, never joining, but no longer actively hostile. It was during the 3rd week that the vision came. Mara woke in darkness, her silver hair soaked with sweat, her heart racing like prey-fleeing predators. She hadn't dreamed in years. Exile had stolen even that small mercy. But now, dreams came with force and clarity. She'd seen blood. 7 wolves she didn't know, bearing the mark of the southern packs. And behind them, a figure wrapped in shadow. A betrayal. Something that would force Aldrich to choose between his pack and something else. Someone else. She ran through the fortress corridors, barefoot and desperate, until she found his chamber. He was already awake. She could see him standing at the window, staring out at the moonlit snow, his scarred face troubled. "Aldrich," she breathed. He turned immediately, and something in his expression softened. That was the change she'd noticed, the way he looked at her now, the way he moved closer instead of away. "Nightmare?" he asked. "Prophecy," she said. And the word hung between them, heavy with the weight of ancient things. She told him what she'd seen. He listened without interrupting, his scarred face growing harder as she spoke. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. "The southern packs," he said finally. "I've known they were gathering strength. Kessa warned me weeks ago, but I thought—" He turned back to the window. "I thought we had more time." "Time for what?" Mara asked. "To prepare," Aldrich said quietly, "to decide who you really are to this pack. Because if war comes, and my blood tells me it will, then everything changes. You'll need to be more than the king's claim. You'll need to be something the pack can believe in. Something that might turn the tide of a battle." "I'm not a warrior," Mara said. "No," Aldrich agreed. "You're something rarer. You're a pathfinder. You see the way forward." He turned to face her fully. "And if it comes to war, my pack needs to know that. They need to see you not as my lover, but as the reason we fight, as the reason we survive." The word hung in the air between them, unspoken but present. Lover. Was that what she was? They hadn't touched beyond the oath, beyond his hand holding hers, beyond the occasional brush of skin that made them both go still. But the bond was there, written in the way they watched each other, in the way silence felt like conversation. "Tell me about the curse," Mara said suddenly. Aldrich's scarred face went carefully blank, the expression of someone guarding a wound too deep to examine. "What curse?" "The one that made them call you the cursed king," Mara pressed. "You said 15 years ago. What happened 15 years ago?" He moved to the fire. Every fortress chamber seemed to have one, Mara had noticed. Fire was a constant, a language this broken king understood. He knelt before the flames, and his shadow on the wall looked like a man praying. "I was supposed to marry the Eastern Queen," he said finally. "It was a political alliance. Our packs would merge, territories would consolidate, and there would be peace." He paused. "I didn't love her, but I was willing to do my duty. That's what a king does. He sacrifices personal desire for pack survival. But you didn't marry her, Mara said. No, Aldrich said, because at the wedding feast, I saw her with my closest friend. And I understood in that moment that duty without truth is just a beautiful lie. So I walked away. I rejected the alliance. I rejected the Eastern Queen. He turned to face Mara, and there was ancient pain in his scarred eyes. And the Eastern Pack, furious at the insult, allied with the Southern Packs to destroy us. That's when I became cursed, not by magic, but by consequence. My choice cost 17 of my wolves their lives. Mara moved to him and knelt before the fire alongside him. And you haven't forgiven yourself, she said. No, Aldrich said. I don't think I ever will. But maybe. He looked at her. Maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is to stop running from it and instead use it to make better choices going forward. The fire crackled between them, and in its warmth, Mara felt something shift. The prophecy she'd seen, the blood, the shadows. The forced choice, it wasn't a punishment. It was an opportunity, a chance for Aldrich to prove that a cursed king could still choose redemption. We'll face them, Mara said, the Southern Packs, and we'll win. How can you be sure? Aldrich asked. Because, Mara said, I've walked the frozen territories for 7 winters. I've learned the paths through mountains that would swallow other wolves whole. I've learned the language of wind and snow and stars. She reached out and took his scarred hand. And I can show you the way through. I can be the pathfinder your pack needs. Aldrich pulled her close, and for the first time, he kissed her. Not a gesture of oath, but an affirmation of choice. It tasted like smoke and sorrow and the possibility of beginning again. When? He whispered against her lips. Soon, Mara said. 3 full moons. They're gathering their strength on the southern border. Aldrich nodded, and when he pulled back, there was something new in his scarred face. Not hope, he was too broken for hope. But certainty, the certainty of a man who'd finally stopped running from his own nature. Then we prepare, he said, and you stop being my secret. You become what you were always meant to be, the voice that guides my pack through darkness. That night, the fortress hummed with a different kind of energy. Word spread through the halls that the king would address the pack, and when Aldrich stood before them with Mara at his side, not behind him, not subservient, but equal, something fundamental shifted. 3 moons, he announced. The southern packs come with war, and we will meet them, but we will not meet them as we have been. We will meet them with the guidance of a pathfinder, with a voice that can see paths through the darkness. He looked at Mara. This is Mara of the Silver Blood. This is the woman who will lead us to victory or death. Either way, she will show us the way forward. The pack bowed. Not to Aldrich alone, but to both of them. And Kessa, standing in the back of the hall, smiled for the first time since Mara's arrival. The 3 moons brought preparation and fear in equal measure. Aldrich's pack trained with an intensity that transformed the fortress into something like a war machine. Wolves ran drills from dawn until deep into the night. Weapons were sharpened, strategies were debated and discarded and revised. But underneath all of it, there was uncertainty, the kind that wars are won and lost on. Mara spent her days with the scouts, teaching them to read the terrain the way she read it. She showed them the hidden passes through the mountains, the routes that avoided the exposed plains where numbers would be the southern pack's advantage. She taught them to listen to wind and snow the way she listened, as a language that carried information. And every night, she and Aldrich stood on the fortress ramparts, watching the southern horizon. "Tell me again," Aldrich said one evening, 7 days before the first moon of battle. "Tell me what you see when you look that direction." Mara closed her eyes. The gift of the Pathfinder wasn't just about seeing physical paths. It was about seeing the movements of fate, the currents that carried destiny. It was ancient, instinctive, impossible to explain. "I see 5 packs," she said quietly, "moving north in coordinated formations. They're not fractured like independent wolves. Someone's united them. Someone's given them purpose." "The Southern Queen," Aldrich said. The Eastern Queen had married and moved south. Now she ruled the coordinated Southern territories, and she'd never forgiven Aldrich for his rejection. "Yes," Mara confirmed, "and she's brought something else with her. Something old." "Magic," Aldrich said. It wasn't a question. "Dark magic," Mara said. "The kind that binds packs against their nature. The kind that promises power in exchange for soul." She opened her eyes. "They're not coming just to defeat you. They're coming to consume you. To take your territory and your wolves and break your power so completely that no northern pack will ever rise again." Aldrich was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Then we lose," he said, "because I won't bind my pack to dark magic. I won't sacrifice their souls to save their bodies." "No," Mara said. She took his hand, the scarred one, and held it against her chest. "But you have something they don't." "What?" Aldrich asked. "Choice," Mara said simply. "They're bound by magic. Every wolf in those southern packs is enslaved to the Queen's will. But your wolves choose you. They fight for you because they believe in you, not because they're compelled to." She paused. "That's a strength that dark magic can't account for. That's something older and more powerful." Aldrich looked out at the darkness, and she could see the weight of 15 years of guilt pressing down on him. "What if I'm wrong?" he asked quietly. "What if my choice costs them everything?" "Then you'll have tried," Mara said. "And that matters. It matters that you tried. That you chose compassion over cruelty. That you refused to become what they wanted you to become." She squeezed his hand. "Besides, I've seen the path through. It exists, Aldrich. I've walked it in vision and prophecy. We don't lose this war." "You've seen that?" he asked, turning to her sharply. "I've seen." "Possibility," Mara corrected. "The future isn't fixed. It's a road with many branches, but there is a branch where you survive, where your pack survives, where the woman I—" She paused, not quite brave enough to finish. "The woman you what?" Aldrich asked softly. "The woman I'm beginning to love," Mara finished, "gets to keep the man she's bound to." Aldrich pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it tasted like war and passion, and the terrible vulnerability of choosing love when death was circling. The first moon of battle came on a night when the blizzard howled like the dying. The southern packs emerged from the storm like shadows made solid, 5 of them, numbering at least 200 wolves. Aldrich's pack, even with scouts and reinforcements from neutral territories, numbered less than 120. They were outnumbered 2 to 1. The Southern Queen emerged in human form, standing at the base of the fortress steps. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things are beautiful, sharp-edged, predatory, wrong. The scent of dark magic rolled off her like fog. "Aldrich," she called out, her voice carrying across the frozen ground. "Still playing king in your broken castle? Still pretending you matter?" "I don't pretend anymore," Aldrich called back from the ramparts. "I know exactly what I am. The question is, do you know what you've become?" The Queen laughed, and the sound carried notes of something inhuman. "I've become powerful," she said. "I've become what you were too weak to be. And I'm going to take everything from you, your fortress, your wolves, your pride." She paused. "And the girl." Mara stepped forward on the ramparts. She felt Aldrich tense, trying to pull her back, but she held firm. "I'm here," Mara said. Her voice was small against the wind, but it carried. The Pathfinder's gift made it carry. "You'll have to go through me first." The Queen's eyes locked on her, and Mara felt the weight of ancient malice. "The Pathfinder," the queen said, and she smiled. "How delicious. Do you know what we do with pathfinders, little girl? We break them. We take their gift and we twist it, make it show us paths to destruction instead of salvation." "I don't think so," Mara said, and then she sang. It was different than the song that held rogues. This song was a call to every wolf who'd ever felt the pull of true north, who'd ever known what it meant to choose their own path. The song moved through the fortress walls and into the hearts of Aldrich's pack, and she felt them respond. She felt them shift, felt their power amplify through her gift. But the southern wolves didn't fall back. Instead, they began to howl, a sound that was wrong, corrupted, layered with the power of dark magic. The two songs crashed against each other in the frozen night, and the fortress itself seemed to shudder. "Begin," Aldrich commanded, and his pack poured over the ramparts like an avalanche. The battle that followed was chaos and blood and the terrible beauty of survival. Mara ran through the fortress halls with Kessa. Yes, Kessa, who'd fought at her side once she understood Mara's gift, pointing out the paths the rogues would take, the entrances they'd use, the weaknesses in their formations. And everywhere Mara led them, Aldrich's wolves cut through the corrupted southern pack like they'd learned to read the very future itself. But it was when the queen managed to reach the inner sanctum, when she cornered Mara in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, that everything changed. "You see?" the queen hissed, her form half-shifted, more wolf than woman. "Your gift is nothing against real power, nothing against—" "Against what?" Mara asked. "Against someone who has to use magic to make others follow. Against someone too weak to inspire loyalty on her own?" The queen lunged, and Mara saw the end clearly in that moment. She saw the path that led to her own death, bright and unavoidable. She took a different path. Mara reached into her own blood, into the ancient magic of the Pathfinder bloodline, magic that was meant to guide, not to fight. And she released it. The room filled with light, with the resonance of every path that had ever existed, and in that light, the queen's stolen power became visible. All the enslaved souls she'd bound to herself, screaming. The queen fell to her knees, and Mara finally understood the true gift of a pathfinder. She could show people the paths they'd chosen. She could show them their own choices, laid bare. And some people, when they see their own darkness made visible, choose to end it. The queen took her own life before Aldrich's wolves could reach her. When the battle ended, Mara was covered in blood, not all of it hers, but some. Aldrich found her standing in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, looking at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. "It's over," he said, and pulled her close. "Is it?" Mara asked. "Or is it just the beginning?" Aldrich didn't answer. Instead, he held her, and together they watched the fire burn with colors that had never existed before, colors that belonged only to the future they might build. Comment, Luna, if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The fortress changed after the battle. 37 of Aldrich's wolves were dead. Another 43 bore wounds that would scar them forever. The courtyard was stained with blood that would freeze and thaw with each season until, eventually, grass grew over it, and people forgot that a battle had ever happened there. But the memory would remain. Memory always remained. Mara worked without sleep for 3 days, moving between the wounded, singing her healing songs. Each wound she mended cost her something, a piece of her own strength, her own light. Aldrich watched from the edges, and she could see the guilt written across his scarred face. The 17 wolves who'd died 15 years ago, now 37 more. All of them had died because they'd chosen to follow a king who'd chosen mercy over tyranny. "It's not your fault," she said on the third night, when she finally collapsed beside him by the fire. "Isn't it?" Aldrich asked quietly. "If I'd accepted the Eastern Alliance, If I'd bound myself to the queen instead of refusing her, none of this would have been different, Mara finished. It would have been different and worse. You would have become something without a soul, Aldrich. And eventually, that kind of power always consumes itself. She was so tired that her words came out as simple truth, unvarnished. Aldrich pulled her close, and she felt him breathe her in, as if she might disappear if he didn't hold tight enough. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked. "How do I lead a pack that's bleeding? How do I ask them to believe in me after this?" "You don't ask," Mara said. "You show them. You show them that this wound, this loss, is the price of freedom, the price of choosing your own path instead of walking the one others demand." She pulled back just enough to look at him. "And you don't do it alone." "What do you mean?" Mara stood, moving on legs that felt like they belonged to something that had lived underwater. She walked to the window and looked out at the fortress, at the snow-covered courtyard where wolves still moved, still worked, still grieved. "I mean that I'm not leaving," she said. "I mean that I'm not going back to exile or wandering the frozen territories searching for meaning. I'm staying here, with you. I'm choosing to bind my future to yours, not because of a blood oath or a moment of desperation, but because—" She paused, and her voice cracked. "Because I love you, Aldrich, and I want to help you rebuild. I want to help you become something that this world hasn't seen in 1,000 years. A king who chose love over power and found that love was the only power that mattered." Aldrich stood and moved to her. He was silent for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was barely more than a whisper. "I don't deserve you," he said. "No," Mara agreed, "but I don't deserve you either. And maybe that's the point. Maybe we both deserve to be more than what we've been running from." He took her face in his scarred hands and kissed her, not gently, not carefully, but with the absolute certainty of a man who'd finally stopped questioning his own worth. And Mara kissed him back. And in that kiss, she felt something fundamental shift. The loneliness she'd carried for 7 winters began to transform into something else. Not quite hope, but something adjacent to it. The knowledge that there was a place in the world where she belonged. When they broke apart, Aldrich rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. It wasn't a question. It was a choice, offered and waiting. "Yes," Mara said. They were married 3 days later, when the last of the wounded had been stabilized and the pack had begun its grieving in earnest. The ceremony happened in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, with only Kessa and the eldest wolves present. There were no grand gestures, no elaborate rituals, just 2 broken people, binding their futures together. Kessa placed a crown of silver, twisted from old coins and shaped into something that caught the light like a frozen moment, on Mara's head. "Welcome to the weight of being queen," the old wolf said, not unkindly. "It's heavier than you can possibly imagine. But if anyone can carry it alongside a king who loves her, it's someone who's already learned to carry the weight of being herself." That night, in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, Aldrich and Mara became lovers in truth, and it was both more tender and more fierce than either of them had anticipated. There was no shyness between them. They'd both been broken too thoroughly for that. Instead, there was the raw honesty of 2 people who understood suffering and chose to offer each other something like healing. "I had a vision," Mara said afterward, as they lay together in the firelight. "Before the battle, I saw us here, like this. I saw our future." "What does it look like?" Aldrich asked, his scarred face soft with something like peace. "It's not fixed," Mara said. "Futures never are, but in the strongest visions, I see children born with silver hair and scars. I see a fortress that heals. I see a pack that learns to choose their own paths instead of following blindly." She paused. "I see you becoming something more than the cursed king. I see you becoming the merciful king, the one who proved that love could be more powerful than magic." Aldrich was quiet for a long time. "Do you see the ending?" he asked finally. I see many endings, Mara said. Most of them involve us old and surrounded by wolves who love us. Most of them involve you finally forgiving yourself. She turned to face him fully. Is that enough? More than enough, Aldrich said. And then he pulled her close again, and they slept by the fire, wrapped in each other and in the certainty that, finally, after so many winters of wandering, they'd both come home. In the morning, the pack would gather, and Aldrich would tell them that their queen was a pathfinder, a gift from the goddess herself. In the weeks to follow, wolves who'd been skeptical would become believers. Territories would extend their allegiances, and slowly the northern lands would heal. But that night, there was only the silver blue fire, and two people who'd learned that mercy was a kind of strength that no amount of dark magic could overcome. 2 winters after the battle, Mara woke to find the world transformed. The fortress had been rebuilt not as a monument to pain, but as a sanctuary for healing. The broken glass had been replaced with walls of smoother stone, and new structures rose beside the old ones, places for the wounded to recover, halls where Mara taught the young wolves to listen to the paths that guided them. The pack had grown to nearly 200 strong, though not all of them were Aldrich's blood. Some had come from packs that had suffered under the old system, and they'd found refuge in Aldrich's kingdom precisely because it didn't demand what the others did. But today, everything was different. Today, Mara felt the pull of a destiny that transcended even prophecy. "It's coming," Kessa said, standing in the chamber with the silver blue fire. The old wolf had become Mara's closest advisor, had reconciled with her skepticism and transformed it into fierce protection. "I can smell it." The child. Aldrich paced the outer corridor, doing what he'd been doing for the past moon, waiting, fearing, hoping. When Mara called out, he was there immediately, kneeling beside her, taking her hand. "Don't let go," Mara breathed. "Never," Aldrich promised. The child came as the fire burned its brightest. A girl with silver hair streaked through with black, her skin marked with a birthmark that looked like a scar, like a map, like a path written in flesh. She came with a cry that wasn't quite wolf, wasn't quite human, but something that harmonized with the silver blue flames themselves. Kessa caught her, cleaned her, and placed her in Mara's arms. "She's beautiful," the old wolf said, and there were tears in her ancient eyes. The child had Aldrich's face, the structure of bone, the intensity of gaze. But she had Mara's hair, her gift. Mara could feel it even now, in the way the infant's small fingers reached not for Aldrich, but for the light. She was reaching for paths, for futures, for the many directions her life could take. "What do we call her?" Aldrich asked, and his scarred face was transformed by wonder. "Luna," Mara said softly, "after the moonlight that guided me through exile, after the symbol of our bond." They held her together, and outside the chamber, the pack began to celebrate. This child was not just a symbol of their king and queen's love. She was a symbol of redemption itself, proof that broken things could be mended, that exile could become destiny, that the paths that seemed to lead only to death might instead lead to rebirth. But as Mara looked down at her daughter, she felt something shift in the prophecy. The future was still branching, still full of possibility. But there was something new in the paths now, something older, something that suggested this child would grow to be something neither she nor Aldrich could quite imagine. "What do you see?" Aldrich asked quietly, reading the shift in her expression. "I see her walking paths we haven't discovered yet," Mara said. "I see her becoming something that bridges the old world and the new. I see her." Mara paused, unsure how to articulate the vastness of the vision. "I see her becoming a legend." Aldrich smiled, actually smiled, the scar tissue around his eye crinkling in that way that meant he was genuinely happy. "Then we'll teach her well," he said. "We'll teach her that legend isn't about power. It's about choosing compassion when cruelty is easier. It's about seeing the path forward when others have gone blind. The child opened her eyes, silver blue like the fire, and looked directly at Mara. For just a moment, she seemed infinitely old, infinitely wise. Then she blinked, and she was just an infant again, seeking her mother's warmth. "Welcome to the world, Luna," Mara whispered. "Welcome to the paths that will be yours to walk." The months that followed were a strange new magic, the kind that had nothing to do with prophecy and everything to do with the small, mundane miracles of a child growing, learning, becoming. Luna's first words were a song, and when she sang, the fortress itself seemed to hum in response. Her first steps traced patterns in the snow that later turned out to match the routes that scouts had been searching for weeks to discover. But the most profound change was in Aldrich. The guilt that had defined him for 15 years began to shift. It didn't disappear, the scars didn't fade, the memory of the wolves he'd lost didn't ease, but it transformed into something else. It became fuel for his determination to build a legacy worth the cost that had been paid. It became context for his choices, not a definition of his worth. One evening, standing on the fortress ramparts with Luna on his shoulders, Aldrich turned to Mara. "I had a dream last night," he said. "I was talking to the wolves who died in my wars, and instead of being angry, they were." He paused, struggling for words. "They were at peace. They told me that their deaths had meaning, because they'd fought for a king who eventually learned to value life above victory." "That's not a dream," Mara said softly. "That's forgiveness. That's your ancestors' spirits telling you what you finally learned, that a king's worth isn't measured in battles won, but in peace built." Luna gurgled on his shoulders, and both of them looked up at her. The child was reaching for the stars, for futures that hadn't been written yet, for paths that only a pathfinder could see. "What do you think she'll become?" Aldrich asked. "I think," Mara said, "that she'll become something new, something that neither of us could have imagined. That's the gift of love, Aldrich. It creates futures we can't predict, and that's exactly as it should be." That night, as Luna slept between them, Mara felt the prophecy settle. The child had arrived, and with her, a new chapter of the world had opened. The battles were not over. There would be more challenges, more wolves seeking to reclaim the old ways of power and domination. But there would also be this: a king who'd learned to love without condition, a queen who'd walked through exile and emerged as a guide for others, and a child born between them who would carry both their legacies forward. The wound that Aldrich had carried for 15 years had been healed not through forgetting, but through transformation, through choosing to build something new from the ruins of what had been broken. 5 winters after Luna's birth, the prophecy revealed its final turn. Aldrich was dying. It wasn't a sudden thing. It was the kind of death that comes to those who've spent their lives carrying weight they were never meant to carry. The curse that had marked him for 15 years, the one he thought he'd finally transcended, had one last manifestation. It was written in his blood, in the way his scars were beginning to glow with a faint silver light. "How long?" Mara asked the healers, though she already knew. A pathfinder could see the paths, and the path that led to Aldrich's death was suddenly very clear. 3 moons, the eldest healer said quietly. "Perhaps 4, if he's strong enough." Mara stood in the fortress courtyard, the same courtyard where blood had frozen and thawed so many times, and finally allowed herself to break. She didn't cry. She was past crying. Instead, she sat in the snow and felt the weight of all the paths she'd walked, all the choices she'd made that had led her here. 7 winters of exile, a battle fought, a love built from broken pieces, a child born between 2 worlds. And now, a ending that came too soon. Luna found her there. The 5-year-old had her mother's gift, which meant she had her mother's grief. The child sat beside Mara in the snow, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. "Papa's dying," Luna said finally, It wasn't a question. Yes, Mara confirmed. Can you stop it? Luna asked. With your gift? No, Mara said. The gift shows me paths, but it doesn't change them. It doesn't give me power over fate. Luna was quiet for a long time. Then, what if you walked a different path? What if you refused the one he's on? Mara looked at her daughter, this child born between two worlds, carrying gifts neither parent fully understood. And in that moment, she understood something fundamental about prophecy, about the difference between seeing a path and having to walk it. Come with me, Mara said. She took Luna's hand and led her to the chamber with the silver-blue fire. The fire had changed in the years since the battle. It burned with colors that seemed to shift between possibilities, as if it were showing every potential future simultaneously. I need you to do something, Mara said. I need you to listen with your gift, the way I've taught you. And I need you to tell me what you see when you look at your father's path. Luna closed her eyes. She was young, but her gift was already vast, perhaps because she'd been born between a king and a pathfinder, perhaps because she carried both their legacies. When she opened her eyes again, they were luminous with understanding. He doesn't have to die, Luna said quietly. There's another path, but it costs something. What does it cost? Mara asked, though she thought she already knew. It costs his guilt, Luna said. The 15 years he's been carrying. It costs the weight he's convinced himself is the price of his redemption. If he lets go of that, if he stops believing that he needs to carry the deaths of the wolves he lost, then the curse releases. Then he can live. Mara knelt beside her daughter. That's very wise, she said, but that's not something I can make him choose. He has to see the path himself. So when Aldrich was brought to the chamber with the silver-blue fire, carried by Kessa and the other elders, his body already beginning to glow with that faint silver light, it was Luna who sat beside him. Hello, Papa, the child said. Hello, my little star, Aldrich replied. His voice was already beginning to thin, to lose substance. I have something to tell you, Luna said. I have a gift, like Mama. I can see paths, and I can see yours. And Papa, there's a path where you live. There's a path where you get to watch me grow up, where you get to grow old beside Mama, where you finally get to stop being sorry about things that weren't your fault. Aldrich's scarred face crumpled. Baby, I have to carry that weight. It's the price of... Of what? Luna interrupted, and there was a fierceness in her voice that seemed too old for a 5-year-old. Of being human. Of making a choice. Papa, you made a choice that cost lives. But you've also made 1,000 choices since then that saved lives. You've built something good here. You've loved my mother with a love that's stronger than any curse. And you've taught me what it means to be brave. She took his glowing hand in both of hers, small hands, but strong. The curse says that carrying guilt forever is strength, Luna said. But Mama taught me that real strength is letting go. Real strength is choosing to live even when you think you don't deserve to. Aldrich looked at his daughter and then at Mara, who stood by the silver-blue fire with tears streaming down her face. I'm afraid, he whispered. If I let go of the guilt, who am I? You're the man I chose, Mara said. You're the father who raised a daughter who can see futures. You're the king who learned that mercy is power. You're Aldrich, and that's enough. He took a shaky breath, and then, with effort that seemed to tear through his very being, he released it. He released the weight of the 17 wolves, the guilt of his choices, the belief that he needed to suffer forever to balance some cosmic scale. The silver light that had been glowing in his scars flared suddenly, brilliant, blinding, and then faded. When it was gone, Aldrich's breathing changed, deepened, became steady again. He was still scarred. The marks would never fade. But the curse, the weight of it, was gone. Luna smiled up at him. Welcome back to the world. Papa, she said. 20 winters passed. The fortress was no longer a place of exile and battle. It had become a sanctuary for those who'd lost their way. Wolves who'd been rejected by their packs, omegas who'd been told they were worthless, alphas who'd been corrupted by power and were seeking redemption. All of them came to the northern throne, and Aldrich and Mara welcomed them. Luna grew into a woman who carried both her parents' legacies. She was a pathfinder like her mother, but with Aldrich's strength of character, his willingness to sacrifice for others. She spent her time walking the territories, helping lost wolves find their way home, guiding packs through moral crises, teaching them what it meant to choose love over domination. On her 25th winter, Luna stood on the ramparts of the fortress and looked out at the world. Her silver and black hair caught the moonlight, and her eyes, silver blue like the ancient fire, were full of possibilities. Aldrich and Mara stood with her, old now, but not broken. Their scars had become soft stories instead of fresh wounds. They held each other as they always had, partners in the work of building something better than what had come before. "I'm leaving tomorrow," Luna said. "There's a territory 3 months' journey south where a young omega is being hunted. The local packs believe she's cursed because she can heal with her touch. I need to show them that they're wrong. I need to show them what my parents taught me, that difference isn't weakness. That mercy is the strongest force in the world." Aldrich smiled, that scarred, beautiful smile that came from a man who'd finally stopped running from himself. "When will you return?" he asked. "In a year," Luna said. "Maybe 2. The paths aren't fixed yet, but I'll return. I always do." That night, in the chamber with the silver-blue fire, Luna sat alone and listened to the flames sing. They sang the story of her mother's exile, her father's curse, the battle that had transformed them both. They sang of pain and redemption, of love that had been earned rather than given, of a child born between 2 broken people who became whole because they chose each other. And as Luna listened, she understood something profound. The fire wasn't singing about the past. It was singing about the future, about all the paths that would branch from her journey, all the wolves she would guide, all the packs she would transform through the simple act of showing them their own worth. She touched her hand to the flames, and they burned silver blue in response, not harming her, but welcoming her. She was the daughter of the Pathfinder and the Merciful King. She carried their redemption forward into the world. Tomorrow, she would leave the fortress. Tomorrow, she would walk into uncertainty and cold and the possibility of failure. But she would also walk knowing this, that she came from love, that she came from choice, that she came from 2 broken people who'd learned that broken things, when handled with care, could become something infinitely more beautiful than they ever were whole. The paths stretched out before her, countless, luminous, full of potential, and Luna, the Pathfinder's daughter, was ready to walk them all. Outside, the blizzard began to fall again. Inside, the silver-blue fire burned eternal, keeping watch over the fortress and all the broken souls who found their way home to it. And in the deepest chamber, where no one else could see, the flames whispered a secret, that every curse carried within it the seed of its own redemption, that every rejection was an invitation to find your true pack, and that love, real, chosen, hard-won love, was always, always worth the price. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe, because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.